Welcome to the GW Integrative Medicine podcast, the podcast about disease prevention and health promotion from the Office of Integrative Medicine and Health at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. I'm Dr. Leigh Frame, Director of the Integrative Medicine programs here at GW.
I'm Dr. Emily Ho, Director of the Linus Pauling Institute and Professor in the College of Public Health and Human Sciences at Oregon State University. Today, we're going to talk about vitamin D and the immune system with Dr. Adrian Fritz Gombart, who's a principal investigator at the Linus Pauling Institute and a professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics, all at Oregon State University.
The Linus Pauling Institute is a world leader in the study of micronutrients, phytochemicals, and other dietary factors, and the role these compounds can play in promoting optimum health or preventing and treating disease.
Dr. Gombart's research focuses on understanding how vitamin D status influences how well the immune system works, including the body's ability to fight off infection, which is a very timely topic today.
Absolutely. It's great to have you with us. Welcome to GW Integrative Medicine, Dr. Fritz.
It's a pleasure to be here, Leigh and Emily.
Dr. Gombart, what are the different forms of vitamin D? Why aren't we getting enough of it? And when is it necessary to think about taking vitamin D supplements? Three-part question.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there. I might start off with just saying that this is the month of November, as everybody's quite aware, and we're actually entering a period of time in the year where most of us living, say, north of 35 degrees latitude aren't going to be able to synthesize vitamin D by getting sun exposure like we can in the summertime. And this will persist until about sometime in March. So this is actually a very timely subject and in those regards. And just to perhaps familiarize folks with vitamin D, it is important to understand the different forms of vitamin D. So most of us are aware that we can synthesize vitamin D in our skin with exposure to sunlight, and that's generally during these non-winter months. And that's because you have ultraviolet B rays, which cleave a cholesterol molecule that's found in the skin. And this leads to the production of vitamin D, which is also called cholecalciferol. And this form of vitamin D circulates in the blood to the liver. And in the liver, vitamin D is hydroxylated, it's modified chemically, and turned into a form called 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And since we synthesize it in our skin, it's vitamin D3. And this is the major form of vitamin D that we find in our blood. And it's the form that's important for conversion to another form of vitamin D, which is 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D. And this is synthesized in the kidney. And this synthesis is highly regulated by the body. Generally, when the body senses low levels of calcium in the blood, there's a signal for the kidney to start synthesizing 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D. And this 125 D3, which I'll refer to it as, is important in binding to a vitamin D receptor, and this turns on expression of genes. And in the regulation of calcium levels in the body, this turns on genes in our small intestine that increase the uptake of calcium from the diet. And the reason this is all important primarily in bone health. So why aren't we getting enough of it? Part of it gets back to season. So right now, as we enter winter, there's not enough ultraviolet B rays in the sunlight because of the angle of the sunlight to the earth. It's all being filtered out at this time. And so you can stand out outside in a sunny day in the winter and not synthesize any of the vitamin D, which is then converted to 25-hydroxy vitamin D.
So is it widespread across the U.S. in terms of, here in Oregon, we don't get a lot of sunshine compared to other areas. Are we more at risk for deficiencies then?
Right now, yes. So with the with the onset of winter, we're going to be at more risk unless you're getting it in the diet or through a supplement. And diet is actually not a not a really great source for vitamin D because there's only very few foods that are actually decent sources for vitamin D, and those include things like fatty fishes, which might be salmon or uh, things like mackerel. And there's some in, you can find some vitamin D in tuna and sardines. And
What
the
about plant-based sources? Are there any
there
plant-based
there
sources of
really
D?
aren't there yeah there really aren't any there are not any plant-based sources. However, there are mushrooms, which are fungi and not necessarily plants, and they can be a source of another form of vitamin D called vitamin D2. And vitamin D2 is derived from the cholesterol molecule called ergosterol that's in fungal fruiting bodies. It's also found in yeast. And if you treat mushrooms with UVB rays, you will cleave that cholesterol molecule into the ergosterol into uh, pre-vitamin D2. And then if we consume those mushrooms, our bodies can convert vitamin D2 into the 25 hydroxy vitamin D2 form. So there's a D2 form from fungal sources, and there's a D3 form that we synthesize or that you can get from animal sources. The There are some reports now that there are some algal forms of D3, which would be the same as the D3 we synthesize. So there are actually companies that are producing that. So technically, that would be a plant source. Um, and But generally, from the types of plants that we consume in our diet, you would not be getting vitamin D. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, it's important to make sure that you are obtaining your vitamin D either through sun exposure or through perhaps a vitamin source, a supplement source. The extent of deficiency varies, and it depends on the cutoff that you use for deficiency. But there are, I'd say significant rates of, say, inadequate levels of vitamin D in the population. Anywhere from maybe 50 to 70% of the population may not be getting adequate levels. And
Wow, that's a
so,
lot.
and again, it depends. It depends on the cutoff that you're using. Uh, so, uh, when is it necessary to think about taking vitamin D supplements? It might be important to think about it if you have limited sun exposure, and that can be due to the time of year, your geographical location. Because if you live closer to the equator, you can synthesize vitamin D by sun exposure all year round. So folks in Los Angeles don't necessarily have to worry about it too much. However, most people don't get much sun exposure because of our lifestyles, and we also tend to avoid sun exposure using either covering up with clothing or using sunscreens, and that'll affect the ability of your body to synthesize vitamin D. Um, and there are some populations, of course, who cover their bodies extensively with clothing for various reasons and are not going to synthesize vitamin D. And then people with darker skin color, such as blacks or Hispanics, um, need to be exposed longer to the sunlight to synthesize adequate levels of vitamin D. Because the melanin, which darkens the skin, acts as a natural sunscreen. So there can be various reasons. Also, your diet, like I mentioned earlier, if you're not consuming things like fortified dairy products and so forth.
So, Fritz, one of the things that I've seen in the literature is that vitamin D2 is not as effective as vitamin D3. And so, if you have some of these risk factors, would it be better for people to look for vitamin D3 for a supplement?
Vitamin D3 is considered a better, I guess, form of vitamin D, and there are some reasons for that. And one thing is that studies comparing vitamin D2 versus vitamin D3 has shown that if you take a large dose of vitamin of either form, the vitamin D3 will maintain at higher levels in the blood for a longer period of time. So it appears that D2 has a shorter half-life in the blood than D3. However, if you're taking daily doses of either vitamin, it's probably that's not going to be an issue. However, if you're taking larger doses infrequently, that could be an issue. Actually, research is suggesting that taking daily doses of vitamin D, if you're going to use a supplement, and it's probably much more effective than taking larger doses infrequently, particularly in regards to perhaps improving the immune response against infections. So,
But what about too much vitamin D? Should we worry about that? Because it is a fat soluble vitamin.
it is when we do recommend that at the LPI we do recommend for adults 2,000 IU per day. That's not a really high level. There are some folks recommend higher doses or higher doses than that, and the current recommendations from the IOM are 600 IU for adults. So we're not, and the upper tolerable level is I believe 4,000 international units per day. So we're well within that upper level, and we've decided that 2,000 IU is probably going to ensure that you reach a serum level of 25 hydroxy vitamin D of around 30 nanograms per mil or higher, which we think is a level that you want to strive for in maintaining. So yeah, you don't want to take too much, but too much would be really, really, really high doses. We would
Right.
be talking perhaps of hundreds of thousands of IU per day for extended periods of time to reach toxicity. And those sorts of events have been quite rare. They're usually due to accidental overdoses and so forth. And but our bodies actually evolved to synthesize up to 20,000 international units per day with sun exposure.
There you go. You also mentioned the 30 nanograms per milliliter cutoff. Now, I know there's a lot of discussion about this and it's very debatable, but one of the differences between which cutoff you choose is whether you're looking at bone health versus the sort of relatively new role of vitamin D in the immune system. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so like you said, it's controversial. How much to take per day as far as a supplement is controversial, as well as what level to reach in the serum. For many years, 30 nanogram per mil was sort of the recommended level to reach. Generally, physicians were looking to reach that for their patients to reach those levels, and that was something recommended by a number of, like the Endocrine Society and so forth. The Institute of Medicine, when they came out with their new recommendations, which did increase the amount of vitamin D you should take each day or get each day, did adjust the serum level down to 20 nanograms per mil. And that was based on the evidence for bone health. So it does appear that reaching 20 nanogram per mil or higher ensures adequate bone health for individuals. The recommendation for other health outcomes related to vitamin D just doesn't have enough evidence, according to the Institute of Medicine, to make public health recommendations at this time. But it's the Endocrine Society did come out with recommendations of achieving 30 nanogram per mil or higher, and so that's sort of where it stands. It's thought that if you reach those levels, you are more likely to perhaps benefit in those other areas of health, which could include immune response.
Right. And there's a lot of literature starting to come out that's showing even maybe 40 nanograms might be a better cutoff, but we just don't quite have the depth of knowledge.
Right. So, yes. And again, there are proponents for higher levels, reaching 40 to 60. And some of these are targeting, say, anti-cancer benefits and so forth. So the evidence, we've been studying vitamin D for, I guess we can say, hundreds of years, since we're now in the 2000s. But it's been known for a long time, and then going back a few hundred years, that sources of even though no one knew maybe it was vitamin D, sources of vitamin D have been important in health. So sun exposure, things like cod liver oil, which is rich in vitamin D, and it's been known that these are you could treat childhood rickets with this, and there was also sun exposure was found to be effective in treating tuberculosis, which is a disease caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection. So it's been known that it's important in immune health and in skeletal health, and so even though we've been studying for a long time, there's still a lot of questions as to how much you need to take or what levels you need to reach in your blood for the various health benefits that have been ascribed to vitamin D. A lot of those studies are based on deficiency. You see increased rates of various health conditions with deficiency. But then studies that are looking at supplementation to correct those conditions aren't always clear cut. Some studies will show no benefit, some will show benefit. And so we're still trying to sort out a lot of these questions, as far as what level to achieve in the blood, or what amount of vitamin D to supplement with to improve health.
Fritz, can you talk a little bit about what vitamin D is doing? So we've talked how it has an effect outside bone, especially with the immune system. What is vitamin D doing in terms of helping the immune system, and how does it help fight against some of these infections you just talked about?
Well, vitamin D, so maybe a little bit about how vitamin D functions. And I mentioned something called the vitamin D receptor. And I also mentioned a form of vitamin D that's 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D. So the vitamin D receptor is a transcription factor. And a transcription factor is a protein that binds to DNA, and it binds to certain regions of DNA that then it turns on expression of other genes. And these genes encode proteins that are important for various processes in cells. And the vitamin D receptor is activated by the form the 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D3 that I mentioned. And this form of vitamin D is synthesized from the circulating 25-hydroxyvitamin D. So it's important to have adequate levels of 25-hydroxyvitamin D to allow synthesis of the active form of vitamin D and when the body needs it. So in the case of bone health, the sensing of calcium in the blood is what leads to the regulation of 125D3 production. In immune cells, it's the presence or absence of a pathogen that can lead to the production of the active form of vitamin D. So our research a number of years ago showed that the active form of vitamin D, when it binds to the vitamin D receptor and activates that receptor, can turn on an antimicrobial peptide gene called the cathelicidin antimicrobial peptide gene. And it had been known before that the active form of vitamin D, when it bound to its receptor, could turn on expression of some other genes involved in immune response. And so in sort of a current model of what's going on in the immune system is that cells like macrophages and dendritic cells, which are sort of key players in sort of communicating with cells of the innate and adaptive immune systems, they're very capable of producing the active form of vitamin D in response to the presence of a pathogen. So I know there's a lot there. Maybe I need to explain some of these a little bit better. But just quickly, adaptive immune system would be your T cells and B cells, which are important in memory responses, and the innate immune systems, a system which can respond very quickly to infection, whereas the adaptive may take time to respond.
Well, clearly the immune response is a pretty complicated system, and not all infections are the same.
Right.
Is there evidence in terms of vitamin D helping certain types of infections versus others?
So the innate immune system generally detects pathogens earlier than other cells of the immune system. And these pathogens are detected through these receptors on cells that recognize molecules associated with pathogens. So there might be a protein or a lipid from bacterial cell walls, or a component of viruses that are recognized by these receptors. And these receptors are found on the dendritic cells or the macrophages. And this then, when they sense that, they are activated and start producing various inflammatory cytokines and other factors to communicate with cells. They also start converting 25 vitamin D to 125 dihydroxyvitamin D. The production of this 125 then allows these immune cells to turn on vitamin D receptor target genes. And a number of these are important in the immune response, like the antimicrobial peptide gene, production of certain cytokines, which are communicating with other cells locally, and also can regulate the expression of these receptors that detect pathogens on cells. So it initiates an immune response, and these macrophages and dendritic cells are also then communicating with the adaptive immune system. And so this allows the body to mount a response to the infection.
So in terms of timing, it sounds like vitamin D has a key role in terms of activating that immune system to help fight off infection. Is it better to make sure you have enough vitamin D before an infection to prevent infection, or does it still have some utility once you have an infection?
And that's a good question. Personally, I believe, and I think a number of folks in the field would recommend that you maintain adequate levels of vitamin D. So rather than it's probably better to think of it more in a preventative sort of fashion rather than a treatment fashion like we generally use drugs. There are studies, looking at these questions, and and it's not all that clear that giving high doses of vitamin D are necessarily going to be beneficial. It may depend on the condition, but if you're already maintaining adequate levels of vitamin D, it does appear that it's probably more beneficial than trying to treat the condition acutely. So, with really high doses. Although there are studies that suggest there could be benefits there as well. So many times people go into the hospital with an illness, an infection, let's say, and it's clear that they have really low levels of vitamin D, and so giving large doses of vitamin D can raise levels quickly, and this could be beneficial because it then allows the adequate production of the active form of vitamin D to then allow the regulation of genes that are under the vitamin D receptor and that are clearly important in immune response. So, but I would say maintaining adequate levels is probably much more beneficial than depending on high dose treatment once you enter the hospital. By then, the disease is on its way, and you're dealing with a different situation than when the body can actually respond properly. The immune system can respond properly to an infection.
Yeah, so I think that begs the question with us being still in the COVID-19 pandemic, what role does vitamin D potentially play in SARS-CoV-2 in fighting that virus off?
I think how we need to view vitamin D is that it's an important factor in allowing the immune system to function properly. And this is true probably for a number of vitamins and minerals. I think you already have talked about zinc with Dr. Ho, and um, and there are, of course, other vitamins, vitamin C and and other minerals, magnesium and selenium and so forth. These are all important in allowing an immune system to function properly. And so by having adequate levels, the immune system responds, let's say, optimally. And this would be the case whether it's a SARS coronavirus, SARS-2 coronavirus or SARS coronavirus 2 infection, other types of coronavirus infections, influenza infections, or cold viruses. So when your body, when your immune system encounters these pathogens, you're generally going to activate the vitamin D pathway. It's probably not going to matter whether it's virus A, B, or C, or a bacterial pathogen. Generally, the innate immune system responds to all of these, and the macrophage, as a good example of the innate immune system responding, is going to respond to these various types of pathogens because it can recognize them. So you get the same sort of general response, whether it's going to be a virus or a bacterial pathogen. With regards to that, of course, you're going to have other types of responses going on with other immune cells, depending on the type of pathogen it is. But this upregulation and production of 125, and then the alerting of the immune system to the presence of the pathogen is going to depend on vitamin D. So part of this is this stuff that we work on is the antimicrobial peptide. And this peptide is important for macrophages in ability to kill a pathogen. The production of the peptide is perhaps also important in inactivating viruses in by different mechanisms. And there's even evidence that the peptide has an impact perhaps on the SARS-2 coronavirus. So production of these antimicrobial responses, because there are others in addition to just this peptide, are important in countering the infection.
Our immune systems have definitely been at the forefront of most people's minds over the last year and a half. And as you mentioned, we're heading into the winter season now as well. And look, I just wanted to circle back. Can we review again in terms of what are the best ways for an individual to make sure that they're getting enough vitamin D?
As far as the best way to get vitamin D, of course, our bodies have evolved to be very, very good at producing vitamin D upon sun exposure. So that's one way to get your vitamin D during the summer. When we get into these winter months, that's not necessarily going to work. We probably evolved as humans to thousands, to say hundreds of thousands of years ago, to synthesize large amounts of vitamin D during the period of time where we could. And being a fat-soluble vitamin, we could store that vitamin prior to the onset of winter. If humans located at around the equator could all synthesize year-round. However, moving northward, this ability to synthesize large amounts and store it was important to get through winter months. I think in today's lifestyle, most of us don't spend excessive amounts of time outside synthesizing vitamin D because of the various lifestyles we pursue, or the fact that we avoid sun exposure because of the concern of developing skin cancer due to damage by the sun rays. So it's unlikely we're storing up large amounts of vitamin D to get through the winter. So you probably would want to consider trying, either if you want to get it in the diet, looking for dietary sources and consuming those dietary sources to keep your levels up. But again, like I said, there are a few foods that are rich in vitamin D, and they're not foods that most people eat every day. These types of fishes and so forth. There are fortified foods like milk, orange juice, some breads, cereals. You can look at packages to see what the vitamin D levels are. Probably some fortified drinks out there, but again, those are, they might have 100 international units, and just to even reach the 600 IU per day, you'd have to drink 6 of those, let's say. Or eat maybe a couple servings of a fish. So diet can be difficult. So it might be that folks would want to consider a supplement, either a multivitamin, which most of those will have that 600 to 1,000 IU in them. And if you want to increase that amount, you can use a standalone supplement of vitamin D itself.
And how much would you think is considered too much?
Too much? Well, we at the LPI, we're recommending that people stay within the upper limit of 4,000 IU per day. However, if you think you're low and you wanted to increase your levels more rapidly and you wanted to take more than that for a short period of time, that wouldn't be a problem. As far as issues with toxicity. Mm-hmm. But again, we're recommending 2,000 IU per day for adults. And if you visit the Micronutrient Information Center at the LPI, you can look up information on the food sources that have vitamin D, and you can also see the recommendations for children and so forth, and older adults.
Great. This is a ton of information. And yes, certainly, if you want to dig in a little bit more, the Micronutrient Information Center at the Linus Pauling Institute is a great resource for vitamin D and all of your micronutrient questions and that you may have. I think that's all the time that we have for today, though. Thank you for joining us, Fritz.
Oh, well, thank you, Emily.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Leigh. It's been a pleasure being here. And just remember, get your vitamin D.
I love that. This is the GW Integrative Medicine podcast from the GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health. I'm Dr. Leigh Frame.
And I'm Dr. Emily Ho.
Thanks for listening.